For 100 years, every acre on that farm grew the same crop. No one remembered exactly when it started. Maybe it was when Martin Brooks' great-grandfather first broke the soil, stood there in the Nebraska wind, and decided that the only thing this land could carry was wheat. The next year, he planted wheat again, and the year after that, and the year after that, and eventually, it stopped being a choice. In Cedar Hollow County, wheat wasn't just a crop, it was the answer. What do you plant? Wheat. What does the market want? Wheat. What did your father grow? Wheat. What will your son grow? Wheat. Martin Brooks had lived his entire life inside those answers. He was 52 in the spring of 1978, a quiet man, steady, the kind of farmer who didn't chase new ideas, because the old ones had never failed him. He knew his land. He knew which parts held water after a storm, which parts dried too fast in a western wind. He knew when to plant, when to wait, when to trust the sky, and when not to. He didn't need books to tell him how to farm. He had 30 years of experience, and before him, his father, and before that, his grandfather, a long line of men, doing the same thing, on the same ground, the same way, and for 100 years, it worked. Until the year, it didn't. Her name was Elena Brooks, Martin's daughter, 19 years old. She came home in early May, just as the fields were being prepared for planting. She had grown up on that farm, driven trucks during harvest since she was 14, walked fields with her father before sunrise, learned the rhythm of planting, without ever making the decisions, because those decisions were never hers. Not in Cedar Hollow, not in 1978. A 19-year-old girl wasn't supposed to tell a man how to farm. But Elena didn't come home empty-handed. She brought a notebook, thick, worn at the edges, filled with numbers, diagrams, and pages of tightly written notes. 2 years of studying agronomy had given her something Martin didn't have, a different way of seeing the same land, not as tradition, not as habit, but as a system, something that could be measured, tested, changed. All winter, she had been reading soil reports, water tables, crop studies from places no one in Cedar Hollow had ever heard of. And slowly, something started to stand out. Not all parts of the farm were the same. Some fields held moisture longer, some didn't. Some produced strong yields, some barely kept up. The West Field was one of those. Thinner soil, less rainfall. Year after year, it underperformed. Martin knew that. He just accepted it. Elena didn't. And one evening, with the last light of the day still coming through the kitchen window, with supper nearly finished, with everything exactly the way it had always been, she opened her notebook, set it on the table, looked at her father, and said something no one in that family had said in 100 years. "Dad, I don't think we should plant wheat on the West Field this year." The room went quiet. Not angry, not loud, just still. Martin set his fork down, didn't look at the notebook, didn't look at the numbers. He looked at her. "Then what do you think we should plant?" Elena didn't hesitate. She had been waiting for that question. For months. Sunflowers. One word, but it was enough. Enough to break 100 years of habit in a single moment. In Cedar Hollow County, no one grew sunflowers. No one sold them. No one bought them. No one planned for them. They didn't exist in the system. And now, a 19-year-old girl was trying to bring them in. Martin didn't answer. He didn't need to, because both of them understood. This wasn't about one field anymore. It was about whether 100 years of doing things the same way could be changed by a notebook and an idea. The next morning, nothing changed. The sun came up the same way it always did. The wind moved across the fields the same way it always had. And in Martin Brooks' mind, the answer was still simple. You plant wheat. But the question Elena had asked the night before didn't go away. It sat there, quiet, persistent. At breakfast, no one mentioned it. Martin drank his coffee. Ruth moved between the stove and the table. Elena didn't open her notebook, but she didn't close it either. 2 days later, Martin drove into town. Same routine, same road, same destination, the co-op. It was the kind of place where decisions didn't just get made, they got confirmed. Farmers gathered there not just to buy seed, but to hear what everyone else was doing, what they were planting, what they were not planting, and more importantly, what nobody was planting. Martin stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Fertilizer, dust, old wood, the familiar weight of a place that hadn't changed in decades. 3 men stood at the counter. Another leaned back against a shelf, coffee in hand. Conversation stopped, then started again. This was how information moved in Cedar Hollow. Not through reports, not through data, through rooms like this. Elena walked in behind him. She didn't usually come here. Not for decisions. But today wasn't usual. Martin ordered seed. Wheat, of course. Enough for most of the farm. He spoke in acres, in rates, in numbers that had never needed to change. Then a voice came from the side. Roy Caldwell, the equipment dealer, 50-something, confident, the kind of man who had built his reputation on being certain. How many acres this year, Martin? Martin didn't hesitate. 300. There was a pause. Not long, but just enough. Roy tilted his head slightly. 300. What's going on with the other 100? Elena answered before Martin could. Sunflowers. Silence. Then, laughter. Not polite, not quiet. The kind of laughter that fills a room and makes sure everyone hears it. Roy leaned forward on the counter, shaking his head. Sunflowers. He looked around at the others. You hear that? Martin's girl wants to plant sunflowers. Out here. A couple of men smirked. One of them chuckled into his coffee. Another just shook his head slowly. This isn't a garden, Roy said. This is wheat country. Elena didn't move, didn't step back, didn't look down. She stood there, exactly where she was. The soil doesn't know that. That changed the room, just slightly, enough to be felt. Roy straightened up, smile still there, but thinner now. I've been working with farmers in this county for 30 years, he said. What this ground does. Do you know how deep wheat roots go? Elena asked. No one answered. Not because they didn't know. Because no one had ever needed to say it out loud. 3 to 4 feet, she continued. On a good year. She took a small step closer to the counter. Sunflowers go twice that. A few eyes shifted. Just slightly. In a dry year, wheat runs out of water up here. She gestured low. Sunflowers don't. Roy let out a short breath through his nose. Not laughing this time. You're talking theory. I'm talking numbers. That landed. Not loudly, but enough. Martin placed his hand gently on Elena's shoulder. Not to stop her, to end it. We're still deciding, he said. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. But in that room, it sounded like hesitation. And hesitation looked like doubt. They walked out together. No one followed. No one said anything else. But as the door closed behind them, the laughter started again. Quieter this time, but still there. Out in the truck, Martin didn't start the engine right away. He stared straight ahead, hands resting on the wheel. You shouldn't have pushed him like that. Elena looked out the window, at the same fields she had grown up around. He's wrong. Martin exhaled slowly. That's not the point. Another pause. Longer this time. You think this is about one field? He asked. Elena turned toward him. No. She already understood. This wasn't just about planting something different. It was about standing alone, while everyone else kept doing the same thing. Martin started the engine. Gravel crunched under the tires as they pulled away. I need time to think, he said. Elena nodded. She had expected that. She had heard those words her entire life. And she knew what they meant. It wasn't a rejection. Not yet. But it wasn't acceptance either. That night, Martin sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The house was quiet. The notebook sat in front of him. Open. Pages filled with numbers he didn't fully trust. Ideas he didn't fully believe, but couldn't ignore. He flipped through it slowly. Yield comparisons. Water usage. Soil depth. Prices. Risk. For the first time in 30 years, he was looking at his own farm, like it might not be as simple as he thought. And somewhere between those pages, between the numbers, between the doubt, a question started to take shape. What if the thing he had always trusted was only working because it had never been tested? Martin didn't give his answer right away. He waited. A day. Then another. Working like he always did. Checking equipment. Walking the fields. Looking at soil that had never once been asked to do anything different. But now, it had. On the third morning, he found Elena in the shed. She was already working. Greasing the drill. Checking plates. Doing things she normally wouldn't touch without asking. If we do this, Martin said, standing in the doorway, we do it on the west field. Elena didn't turn around. Of course. That was the only field she had ever considered. 100 acres, he added. Now she stopped, turned. Met his eyes. That's enough. It wasn't excitement, not yet. It was confirmation. That afternoon, the decision became real. Not in words, but in action. The seed didn't come from town, no one in Cedar Hollow carried it. Martin had to order it from a supplier 2 states north, something he had never done in his life. The bags arrived a week later. Different shape, different weight, different color. Everything about them felt unfamiliar. Like they didn't belong on that farm. Elena handled them carefully, not because they were fragile, because they mattered. Planting started the next morning, the same drill, the same tractor. The same field. But nothing about it felt the same, the seed plates had to be adjusted. The spacing changed, the rhythm broken. Where Martin could normally plant without thinking, now he watched every pass. Every line. Learning something new, on ground he thought he already understood. From the road, it didn't look like much, just another field being planted. But word spread anyway. It always did. Martin Brooks is planting sunflowers. By the end of the week, everyone knew. And everyone had something to say. At the co-op.
They'll never make it. At best, he'll break even. At worst, he'll lose the whole field. Roy Caldwell didn't laugh as loud this time, but he didn't stop anyone else either. And that said enough. June came, and with it, the first signs of something different. The wheat fields came up like they always did, low, even, familiar. The west field didn't. The sunflowers pushed through the soil faster, stronger, thicker stems, broad leaves that caught the light in a way wheat never did. They didn't blend into the land, they stood out. By mid-July, you could see it from the road. One field moving like a soft green wave. The other, rising. Tall, uneven, alive in a different way. People slowed their trucks as they passed. Some pulled over. Got out. Walked a few steps into the rows.
It up close. They didn't understand it, didn't trust it, but they couldn't ignore it either. Martin noticed the looks, the way men paused longer than usual when they drove by, the way conversations stopped when he walked into town. Not open ridicule this time, something quieter, something closer to waiting to see him fail. At home, things were different. Elena walked the west field every morning, before the heat, before the wind, checking growth, checking moisture, checking things Martin had never needed to measure. "They're pulling deeper," she said one morning. Martin stood beside her, looked across the field, saw nothing different. "Not yet. They don't look stressed," she added. "It's not dry yet," Martin said. That was true. For now. The summer moved forward, slow, hot, predictable, until it wasn't. The rain stopped coming, not all at once, but enough. Week by week, the soil changed. The top layer dried first, then cracked, then turned to dust in places where it used to hold together. The wheat felt it immediately. You could see it in the color, in the height, in the way the heads formed thinner than they should. Subtle at first, then not. Martin saw it, every farmer did. But there was nothing to do. You couldn't make it rain. One evening, he walked the wheat fields alone. Boots pressing into ground that didn't press back the same way. He bent down, ran his hand across the soil, dry, loose, not holding. Then he walked west, into the field he hadn't trusted. The air felt different there, not cooler, not wetter, but steadier. He stepped between the rows, looked down. The surface was just as dry, but when he pushed his boot deeper, the soil held. He stood there for a long time, not saying anything, not needing to, because for the first time, he could feel it. Something was different, not visible, not obvious, but real. Behind him, the wheat was already struggling, and in front of him, the sunflowers were still growing. The difference wasn't clear yet, not to anyone driving by, not to the men at the co-op, but it was there. And if the rain didn't come back, it was about to become impossible to ignore. The rain didn't come back. Not that week, not the week after. By mid-June, the sky had settled into something every farmer in Cedar Hollow recognized: clear, bright, empty, and wrong. At first, no one said the word. They never do. Not early, not when there's still a chance. But the signs were there. The wheat stopped growing, not all at once, but enough. The color shifted first, from deep green to something lighter, then pale, then uneven, like the field was slowly forgetting how to live. Martin walked it every morning, the same rows, the same ground, but it didn't feel the same anymore. The heads were smaller, the kernels thinner, some didn't fill at all. He didn't need a report to tell him what was happening. He could see it. He could feel it under his boots. Across the county, it was the same story. Combines started moving early that year, not because the crop was ready, because there wasn't enough of it to wait for. Men who had farmed their entire lives stood in their fields and tried to decide if it was even worth harvesting. Some didn't. At the co-op, the tone changed. No laughter now. No opinions. Just numbers. Lower than anyone wanted to say out loud. Roy Caldwell's dealership sat quiet. Machines lined up, untouched. No one was upgrading. No one was buying. There was nothing to invest in. Martin's wheat came in below average. Not the worst, but not enough. Not for a full year's work. He ran the combine himself. Watched the grain come in. Light. Dry. Less than it should have been. Every pass confirmed the same thing. This wasn't going to carry them. When he shut the machine down, he didn't go inside. He stood there, looking across the field, trying to calculate what wasn't there. Then he turned and looked west. The sunflowers were still standing, shorter than the year before, leaves tighter, heads smaller, but alive. Elena was already in the field, walking the rows, checking heads, breaking open seeds between her fingers. "They're filling," she said when he reached her. Martin didn't answer right away. He looked across the field, then back at the wheat, then at her. "They shouldn't be," he said. Elena shook her head slightly. "They're pulling from deeper." Martin knelt down, pressed his hand into the soil. The surface was dry, cracked, the same as everywhere else. But when he pushed deeper, it changed. It held. He stayed there longer than he meant to, hand in the dirt, feeling something he hadn't trusted, and realizing it had been there the whole time. Harvest came later than wheat. September. Headers, different rhythm, different result. The numbers came in acre by acre, not perfect, not record-breaking, but solid, enough, more than enough. When it was over, Martin sat at the kitchen table with the totals in front of him, the wheat, the sunflowers, side by side. He ran the numbers once, then again, then a third time, like they might change. They didn't. The wheat had barely carried its cost. Some fields, not even that. The sunflowers had carried everything else. Elena sat across from him, didn't say anything, didn't need to. Martin leaned back in his chair, looked at the paper, then at her. "If we hadn't planted that field." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They both knew. Outside, the wind moved across the land, same as always. But the farm wasn't the same anymore. Because now, there was proof. Not in a notebook, not in a classroom, in the field. The thing they had been laughed for was the only thing that survived. The numbers didn't spread quietly. They never do. In Cedar Hollow, every farmer knew every other farmer's yield before the week was over. What came off the field, what didn't, what made money, what didn't. And this year, everyone was asking the same question. How did the Brooks place hold up? At first, the answers came in pieces. Wheat was bad, that part wasn't surprising. But then came the part that didn't fit. The West field did fine. Fine wasn't a word anyone was using that summer, not for crops. By the end of the week, people stopped saying, fine. They started asking something else. What did they plant out there? And the answer came back the same every time. Sunflowers. The same word that had filled the co-op with laughter, now moved through the county in a different tone, quieter, heavier. Roy Caldwell heard it from 3 different men before he drove out himself. Didn't call, didn't ask, just showed up. He found Elena near the shed, working, same as always, hands dirty, cap pulled low. No notebook in sight. "Claire," he started, then caught himself. "Elena." She looked up, didn't smile, didn't frown, just waited. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead."
Roy shifted his weight, not the same man who had laughed across the counter months earlier. 3 farmers came to me this week, asking about sunflower equipment. Elena said nothing. Headers, storage, handling. He paused. I don't carry any of it. Another pause, longer this time. So I need to know, is this a 1-year thing? Elena wiped her hands on a rag. Set it down. Looked straight at him. Do you remember what you said, the first time I mentioned it? Roy didn't answer. You called them decorations, she said. You said this was weak country. The air between them shifted. Not tense. Just honest. For 3 years, she continued, that field made more than the wheat next to it. She took a step closer. And this year, it kept the farm running. Roy nodded slowly. Once. No argument this time. So, Elena said, to answer your question. She gestured toward the field. No. This isn't a 1-year thing. Roy looked out across the rows, then back at her. I'll stock the equipment. And just like that, the man who had laughed the loudest, was the first one to adapt. It didn't happen overnight. Not for everyone. Some farmers held on, trusted the next season would be better. That the rain would come back, and fix everything.
Started asking different questions. Not what have we always planted, but what survives when it matters. The next spring, a few more fields changed. Not many, just enough. Curiosity always moves slower than tradition. But it moves. At the Brooks farm, things changed faster. That winter, Martin didn't draw one planting plan. He drew 4. Rotations. Different crops on different ground. No field repeating the same thing twice. For the first time in his life, he wasn't farming memory. He was farming decisions. One evening, he sat at the kitchen table. The same place where it had started. The notebook open again. But this time, it wasn't Elena explaining. It was him asking. What goes where next year? Elena looked up, not surprised. Just ready. Outside, the land was the same. The same wind, the same soil, the same sky. But the farm wasn't. Because now, it wasn't built on one answer. It was built on choice. Years later, people would talk about that season. The drought, the losses, the fields that didn't make it, and the one that did. But the real change didn't happen in the drought. It happened at a kitchen table, when a 19-year-old girl asked a question no one had asked in 100 years. What if we planted something else? They laughed. The drought came, the wheat died, and the sunflowers lived.